On the afternoon of December 5, 1945, 5 military torpedo bombers lifted off from a naval air station along the southeastern coast of Florida. The sky was clear, the pilots were trained, the mission was routine. Not one of those aircraft, nor the 14 men aboard them, was ever seen again. What followed their disappearance was one of the most baffling search and rescue operations in aviation history, one that would itself become part of the mystery. A rescue aircraft sent to find them also vanished without a trace, taking 13 more men with it. In total, 27 souls were lost in a single afternoon, in waters that were well charted, in conditions that should have posed no serious challenge to experienced naval aviators. No wreckage was conclusively recovered, no bodies were found, and no explanation offered since has fully satisfied the questions that linger to this day. This is the story of Flight 19. The 5 aircraft that took off that December afternoon were TBM Avenger torpedo bombers, reliable and well-tested machines that had served throughout the war. The mission assigned to them was a standard navigation training exercise known as Navigation Problem Number 1, a triangular route that would take them east over the Atlantic, north along the coast, and then back to base. The total distance was approximately 350 miles. Under normal circumstances, the flight should have lasted about 2 hours. Leading the formation was Lieutenant Charles Taylor, a veteran pilot with more than 2,500 hours of flight time. His 4 student pilots, Captains Edward Powers and George Stivers, along with Lieutenants Forrest Gerber and Joseph Bossy, were not raw beginners. They were trained military aviators completing their advanced instruction. By every available measure, this should have been an unremarkable afternoon. They took off at 2 in the afternoon. By 4 o'clock, something had gone terribly wrong. The first indication that trouble was brewing came from a radio transmission intercepted by the control tower at Fort Lauderdale. Lieutenant Taylor's voice came through with an edge of confusion that no one expected. He reported that both of his compasses had malfunctioned and that he was uncertain of his position. He believed he was somewhere over the Florida Keys, the chain of islands stretching southwest of the mainland, but the landscape below him did not match what he expected to see. What makes this detail so haunting is what the weather station and other observers recorded at that same time. Flight 19 was not over the Keys. Based on their flight path, they should have been well to the east, over the open Atlantic. Taylor, for reasons that have never been fully explained, appears to have become convinced he was somewhere he was not. And that conviction, if it guided his subsequent decisions, may have sent 5 aircraft flying deeper into open ocean rather than toward land. Radio contact was intermittent and increasingly difficult. Ground controllers could hear fragments of conversation between the pilots themselves, and what they heard was deeply unsettling. The men were arguing about their heading. Some believed they should fly west to reach the mainland. Taylor, however, reportedly insisted they fly north, then east. Directions that, if his position estimate was wrong, would have carried them further from safety with every passing minute. One transmission, recorded and preserved in the official investigation, stands out above all others. A voice, believed to be Taylor's, was heard to say something that still raises the hairs on the back of the neck of anyone who studies this case. He reportedly said, "We are entering white water. Nothing seems right. We don't know where we are. The water is green, no white." The words themselves are disjointed, possibly fragments of a longer transmission lost to static. But the image they conjure, pilots circling over an ocean that no longer looks familiar, with instruments they cannot trust and a horizon offering no landmarks, is one of profound disorientation. As the afternoon wore on and fuel ran low, Naval Command scrambled a search and rescue operation. A large patrol aircraft, a Martin Mariner flying boat, was dispatched with a crew of 13 men to search the area where Flight 19 was believed to be operating. The Mariner took off at 7:18 in the evening. 23 minutes later, it disappeared. A nearby merchant vessel reported seeing a sudden explosion in the sky, followed by flames on the water. The Mariner, investigators later theorized, may have suffered a catastrophic fuel explosion. These aircraft had a known reputation for fuel vapor accumulation, and a single spark in the wrong place could be devastating. This explanation is plausible and widely accepted by aviation historians. But the wreckage of the Mariner, like that of Flight 19, was never definitively recovered. The search that followed was the largest in naval history up to that point. Over 300 aircraft and dozens of surface vessels combed thousands of square miles of ocean. They found nothing. No oil slicks consistent with 5 crashed aircraft. No floating debris. No life rafts. Nothing that could be conclusively identified as belonging to Flight 19. This absence of evidence is perhaps the most unsettling aspect of the entire case. Aircraft that crash into the ocean, particularly at low speed or in distress, typically leave some trace: fuel, debris, personal effects. The ocean in that region is not particularly deep. The Gulf Stream, which flows through the area, can carry floating objects, but the search began within hours and covered an enormous area. The silence of the sea offered no answers. In the years and decades that followed, the disappearance of Flight 19 became one of the founding stories of what writers and researchers would come to call the Bermuda Triangle, a loosely defined region of the Atlantic between Florida, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico, where an unusual number of ships and aircraft have reportedly vanished under mysterious circumstances. The triangle as a concept was not formalized until the 1960s and 1970s, but Flight 19 was retroactively placed at its center, becoming the defining symbol of a zone where, according to popular belief, the ordinary rules of navigation and physics seem to break down. The connections to other cases in the region are difficult to ignore entirely. In 1948, a passenger aircraft carrying 31 people disappeared without a trace on a flight from the Azores to Bermuda. In 1949, another aircraft vanished on a similar route. Numerous ships over the decades have been found drifting and abandoned, their crews gone, no distress calls recorded, no explanation offered. Whether these incidents share a common cause or simply represent the statistical reality of heavy maritime and aviation traffic over a dangerous stretch of ocean is a question that researchers continue to debate. The official investigation into Flight 19 concluded that the disappearance was caused by pilot disorientation. Specifically, the Lieutenant Taylor's erroneous belief about his position led the flight off course and ultimately into open ocean, where the aircraft ran out of fuel and ditched into the sea. The board noted that Taylor had requested not to lead the mission that day, though the reasons for this are not entirely clear from the record. Some accounts suggest he had a history of becoming lost during flights, though his overall record was strong enough that he was retained as an instructor. This explanation is rational. It is consistent with the known facts. Spatial disorientation is a well-documented phenomenon that has killed many experienced pilots. Compass malfunctions, while unusual, do occur. A flight that flies east over the open Atlantic instead of west toward the Florida coast will eventually run out of fuel with no land in sight. The absence of wreckage, while troubling, can be partially explained by the depth of the ocean in some areas, the force of the Gulf Stream, and the limitations of search technology in 1945. And yet, the official explanation does not account for everything. It does not explain why no trace of 5 large aircraft was ever found, despite an immediate and massive search. It does not fully explain the strange radio transmissions, the references to water that did not look right, the sense among the pilots that something beyond mere compass failure was disorienting them. It does not explain why Taylor, a man with thousands of hours of flight time, was apparently unable to use the sun's position, which would have been visible that afternoon, to determine which direction was west. Some researchers have pointed to the possibility of unusual atmospheric or magnetic anomalies in the region. There are documented cases of compass deviation in certain areas of the Atlantic, caused by geological formations or fluctuations in the Earth's magnetic field. Whether such anomalies could have been severe enough to disorient an entire flight of 5 aircraft simultaneously is an open question. Others have proposed more unconventional theories. The Bermuda Triangle has attracted speculation ranging from underwater geological activity, releasing gases that could destabilize aircraft, to theories involving time distortions or electromagnetic phenomena that defy current scientific understanding. These ideas exist at the far edge of the possible, and no credible evidence has yet emerged to support them. But they persist, in part because the conventional explanation leaves enough gaps to allow the imagination room to wander. What is not in dispute is the human reality of what happened. 14 men flew out over the Atlantic on a clear December afternoon and never came home. 13 more went looking for them and also vanished. The families of those 27 men lived with questions that were never answered. The Navy, in a gesture that speaks volumes, ultimately listed the cause of the disappearance of Flight 19 as causes or reasons unknown. Not pilot error, not weather, unknown. That official acknowledgement of uncertainty is, in its own quiet way, more haunting than any supernatural theory. When the United States Navy, with all of its investigative resources, all of its expertise in aviation and maritime operations, looks at a case and writes unknown, it is worth pausing to consider what that means. What happened over the Atlantic on December 5, 1945? Did 5 aircraft simply become lost and ditch into a sea that swallowed them without leaving a mark? Did something else happen? something that our instruments and our understanding have not yet found a way to measure or explain? The ocean keeps its secrets with remarkable patience. And somewhere out there, in waters that may be shallower than we think or deeper than we can reach, 5 Avenger bombers may still be resting on the seafloor, silent, intact, waiting to be found. Or they may not be there at all. That is perhaps the strangest possibility of all. If this story left you with more questions than answers, you are in good company. The mystery of Flight 19 has fascinated researchers, historians, and curious minds for nearly 80 years, and it shows no signs of letting go. If you found this exploration worthwhile, consider sharing it with someone who loves a good unsolved mystery. And if you want to keep following these stories into the unexplained, subscribing means you will never miss what comes next. The next case we're investigating may be even harder to explain than this one.